Hi, this is Dr. Edie Stoughton again, and I'd like to welcome you to our resource library. Our resource library is comprised of ways that we can help you answer questions in a simple, short, concise way. We appreciate you joining us, and now I'd like to start with our first lesson, which is actually called IEP Basics. Parents don't always know what to expect from an IEP meeting. They're nervous, they tend to be intimidated, they're not sure that they understand how the process works or what their contribution will be in that process. They do know one thing: they want the very best for their child. And that's their hope, and that's also their fear, because it makes them very nervous to enter this room, maybe not having all the facts at their disposal that they would like to have. So for this first video, I'm just going to quickly go through the very basics of what an IEP is and what to expect when you go into that meeting. What is an IEP? Basically, an IEP, the letters stand for Individual Educational Plan. And what it is it's a plan for a child that is actually a legal contract written by the school with the parents' input, and explains what the school will do to help that child learn. The IDEA, which is the Individual with Disabilities Education Act, wrote legal precedent and continues to update special ed law to decide what schools can and cannot do to help children. I want to share with you one sentence in there that's extremely important, a sentence in the law. According to IDEA, every child is to be ensured access to the general curriculum so that he or she can meet educational standards that apply to all children. That's very important. That means that the barriers should be removed, that a child's disability should not be a stumbling block, that what the schools need to do to allow that child to have the same access to knowledge that every other child has is the requirement of the schools. They must do that. So that's important. Also important, what are the major sections of an IEP? Just so that when you see it, you'll know what you're looking at. The first most important section is called the current levels of performance. This means what your child can do now. And this is an extremely important section, because if it's not accurate, then everything else that happens in the IEP is based on inaccurate information. For example, I was in an IEP meeting where it was said that a 5-year-old who was going into kindergarten was able to recognize and read sight words. But when asked further, the child really couldn't read sight words. What they were saying was that in a puzzle format, with color coding, with a limited number of choices, and with help, he could read the sight words. This is a very important distinction, because whatever's decided he needs in kindergarten will depend on where he is now. You know the old saying, you don't know where if you've gotten there, if you don't know where you're going. So the current levels of performance are extremely important. The next important section are the measurable annual goals. This is where your child should be a year from now. Too often we skip over that goal to get to what services are being provided and how many minutes, sort of the details of the plan. But the goal has to be right. It needs to be a big goal. It needs to be something that you think is important for your child to have mastered within a year. This is certainly worth sitting down and talking about ahead of time. It's certainly worth writing down notes and bringing them to the meeting about what do you think is important that your child needs to accomplish in the next year. So this combined with the current levels of performance will set the plan for your child. If the current levels of performance are wrong, or if the goal is not an accurate goal or a good goal, the entire program could be inappropriate for your child. So it's important that you think about these things and that you know what you're looking at and know what you're signing. The third major section is short-term objectives. This is the how. The long-term goal is the what. What will happen? Where will your child be at the next IEP meeting next year? The short-term objectives are how he will get there. What will the school do? What is the plan for him? What remediation or her? What remediation will be there? It sometimes is a problem that the short-term goals are not explained well enough to you. For example, if a short-term goal says that your son or daughter will be able to read on the 3rd grade level by next year, that doesn't explain how that's going to happen. And that's your right as a parent to question that and ask to have an explanation about that. How will things be done differently if your child is a year or two behind now? What specific remediations, what help, what support will they provide for your child? And you should be able to ask, and they should be able to answer what that's going to look like. Simply to say your child will be able to read on the 3rd grade level by next year sounds like your child's going to accomplish that all by him or herself. And you know that's not going to happen. So it's important that that be explained to you. And then the 4th section is the modifications, accommodations, and interventions. This becomes even more specific. So we've gone from the general to the very specific. What specifically will be provided for your child? For example, will instructions for tests be read to him or her to make sure that they understand what the test is asking? Will they be able to have the help of a speech therapist or an occupational therapist? And if so, how many minutes a week or how many hours? So these are all the details, again, but they have to fit well with that master plan, that annual goal. There, I have prepared a little checklist for you. First, in preparing for your meeting, make sure that you bring all the pertinent information that is necessary. You need to bring testing data. You need to bring reports that people have written about your child, certainly reports from doctors and therapists. But don't leave out Sunday school teachers, babysitters, tutors, people who work with your child on an informal basis. This is your opportunity for the school people to get to know your child and for you to explain what your child needs. You won't have an opportunity like this again where everyone's sitting around the table listening to you. So make sure you're prepared. You also should write down notes about what you want to discuss, questions, concerns, even some suggestions you might have, because you as a parent know that child in a very different way than the school does. So it's good to write it down so that you don't forget, so that you have a plan in your mind and you don't walk out of the meeting thinking, oh, I forgot that. This is too important because, again, it's a contract. Once it's written and once you signed it, it's legally binding. So you want to make sure to get it right. The third thing, never, ever hesitate to ask questions. If you don't understand, don't be intimidated and say, I should know, I'm not going to ask. If testing data are being explained and you don't understand it, you need to be able to ask that question. A lot of times we throw around acronyms as educators like PDD-NOS, AYP, LRE. We forget sometimes that parents don't know what those mean. So ask. Always be sure to ask. Fourth, if there's not agreement on the plan, and this is very important, don't sign it. Ask to reconvene and discuss it again. because it is too important for your child. Not only, as I said before, is it legally binding, but you also don't want to waste a year of your child's educational life on a plan that's not accurate and appropriate. So don't just say, oh, okay, I'm sure this will work out later. This doesn't sound like what I thought we said, but we'll figure it out. This is the time. Don't sign it and don't agree, and just ask if you can meet again and discuss it a little further. Be sure to follow up and expect accountability. In my practice and in my teaching years, this was the largest problem that parents had. They felt that a plan had been written, it sounded good, everyone signed it, but it wasn't carried out the way that they had expected that it would be. Things happen. Teachers get busy. People forget. There are misunderstandings. It's not necessarily anyone's fault, but you need to make sure, you need to follow up. You need to set up a good communication system with the people at school so that you know what's going on. And if there's a problem, you can meet with them and talk about it before it gets worse. You need to set a timeline. When will we decide if this plan is working? How long will it be before we talk again? Who's responsible? Who's accountable for the things that need to be carried out in the plan? All those you need to decide. The follow-up and the accountability are very important. So that's the basic foundation that you really need to have to go into an IEP meeting. You need to be as well informed as you can be. You need to never be afraid to ask. You need to realize that you're part of this team. You're an equal part of the team. If you have suggestions, if you have ideas, if you have concerns, they are important and you need to bring them forward. It's a team and it's for your child, and there's nothing more important.